Top 10 different Reddit stories.
Cops. What's the most bullshit-sounding excuse you got that actually turned out to be true? Former police officer here, we have quite a few cases when the weird excuse comes out to be true. But the most hilarious one was one day, we got called over to a possible case of domestic violence where the people around the house could hear a lady scream. We arrive at the house and the guy opened wearing only underwear. He told us he and his wife were role-playing. Of course, we didn't trust this and asked to see his wife. After denying us entry, we told we would come back with a warrant. He reluctantly agreed to let us enter. So we go in, and he opened the basement door, and inside was a freakiest sex dungeon. I mean, chains, whips, things I couldn't identify hanging on the wall, and in the middle, hanging inside, was his butt-naked, gagged wife. We asked her, but she told everything was okay. Turned out they were really into some kinky stuff. Asked them to keep the screaming part in the basement and do a minimal. We did the whole thing with a straight face, but as soon as we were in the car, we died laughing. Divorced men. What moment made you I am filing for a divorce? 15 years in, and I find texts on her phone completely blindsided. No clue she had it in her to cheat. Told me it was just texting. Begged for forgiveness. I caved. Then I found emails. She detailed things that made me sick to read. Then I found out she was visiting their nurse service, and this guy was a client. Promise she was done. Love me. You see? No chance she was going to let 15 years go like that. I wasn't buying it anymore, though. She announced she was going out one night with a work friend, promised she'd be home by night. She wasn't bright enough to understand that Google Latitude was still showing me where she was. Once I knew where she headed, I called her dad and my best friend to keep me from doing anything dumb. My father-in-law offered to stay with the kids and wait for her to get home around 3 a.m. She sent me a nasty text asking where the fuck I thought I was. I texted her a screenshot of her little GPS stuff and let her know I'd be sending her some paperwork soon.
A woman is having an affair during the day while her husband is at work. Her 9-year-old son comes home unexpectedly, sees them, and hides in the bedroom closet to watch. The woman's husband also comes home. She puts her lover in the closet, not realizing that the little boy is in there already. The little boy says, "It's dark in here." The man says, "Yes, it is. I have a baseball. That's nice. Want to buy it?" "No, thanks. My dad's outside." "Okay, how much?" $250. In the next few weeks, it happens again that the boy and the lover are in the closet together. "It is dark in here." "Yes, it is. I have a baseball glove." The lover, remembering the last time, asks the boy, "How much?" $750. "Fine." A few days later, the father says to the boy, "Grab your glove. Let's go outside and have a game of catch." The boy says, "I can't. I sold my baseball and my glove." The father asks, "How much did you sell them for?" $1,000. The father says, "That's terrible to overcharge your friends like that. That is way more than those two things cost. I'm going to take you to church and make you confess." They go to the church, and the father makes the little boy sit in the confession booth, and he closes the door. The boy says, "It's dark in here." The priest says, "Don't start that crap again."
Girls, what are the unwritten rules of the girl code that us guys don't know of? Girls help other girls get away from guys. This one time, some super creepster guy was following me around, so I just walked up to a random woman and said, "Oh my gosh, I've been looking for you everywhere." And I gave her the look. She looked behind me, half hugged me, and whispered, "That guy in the red." Then we fake friend walked around to find her giant biker boyfriend. They walked me to my car and everything. If a woman asks you for menstrual products and you have a spare, you give one to her. Doesn't matter if she's your worst enemy or a stranger in a bathroom rest stop, you hand over a spare pad tampon. If you notice that someone has bled through their pants, tell them. Even if you hate each other, even if you're strangers, lower your voice and let them know. If you see your fellow girlfriend drunk and getting hit on by a bunch of guys, don't leave her there. Help her if she's not with someone trusted. If she's considering buying something, be it clothes, a haircut, or whatever, give her honest but not mean advice.
Steve dies and goes to heaven, where St. Peter informs him that he'll have to share apartment with someone else. "You see, it's getting a bit crowded up here," St. Peter explains. "What kind of roommate will I get?" Steve asks. "A gentleman from 14th century Mexico." "Medieval Mexico?" Steve exclaims. "But I'm from 21st century Britain. We'll have nothing in common." "I'm sure you'll find something to talk about if you try," says St. Peter. So Steve is shown to his heavenly home and is introduced to a shy, skinny fellow whom he's supposed to share it with. "So what did you work as?" asks Steve. "Peasant," says the Mexican. "How was that?" "Hard. I was a web designer." "What's that?" "I don't know how to explain it to you. Sorry. Did you have hobbies?" "Mine was old cars." "I don't understand." Thus the conversation continues, both men struggling to keep it going, both fearing an eternity of awkwardness. Then the Mexican asks, "How did you die?" "Well," Steve hesitates. "To be honest, I died because my life had become too difficult for me to handle." "Why had it become so difficult?" "I fell for a pyramid scheme. You see, my heart was stolen by someone who only wanted to use me." The Mexican beams with relief. "What a coincidence."
What were you taught incorrectly when you were a child? I was never taught proper hygiene. My mother was an aloof alcoholic. I rarely took showers between 7 and 16. I knew nothing about the proper care of my body, especially after puberty hit when I was 14. For example, I went years without washing my hair. It looked like I had Brill cream or grease in my hair, but it was all natural oil due to years from never having washed it. One day when I was 16, I visited a friend's house. My friend's mother, Mrs. Hayworth, a strong character, took one look at me and asked me, when was the last time I had washed my hair? I replied, I could not remember. She immediately brought me into the bathroom. Next, she had me bend down next to the bathtub spigot. She then made sure the water coming out of the tap was a lukewarm temperature. She then placed my head under the tap, soaked it, and then applied shampoo. She scrubbed my hair and scalp thoroughly. After she had finished, she gave me a towel. When my hair dried, it was light and puffy. I had never seen it look that way before. I learned a great lesson that day. I still owe Mrs. Hayworth a debt of gratitude. P.S. Mrs. Hayworth was the first person I ever met who was not shy to tell people she was a practicing witch. What highly illegal thing took place at your high school? Two students who were not much into studies planned and carried out a coordinated attack on one of the math teachers. They stood by the top of the stairs between periods waiting for the math teacher to pass, and when he passed by them to go down the steps, one of them pushed him from behind while the other put his leg out to trap him. We all heard the scream and came out of our classes to see what happened. The teacher fell down the steps and broke his neck and back and was paralyzed from the neck down. We ran towards the teacher to pick him up and help him while the two kids were watching us from top of the stairs. The kids were called to the principal's office, and when asked why did they do that, the kids reasoning because one of them was dropped from the basketball team because he was failing that teacher's math class and he wanted to revenge. Both of them were 15 years old, so they didn't get jail time. They both got expelled and were sent to juvenile detention. The teacher sued the school district and got a settlement in the lower 7-digit range. They literally ruined his life, but weren't punished more severely. We all felt bad for the teacher.
People that worked for a dating company. What's the most insane behind-the-scenes fact you found out? I used to work for some dating company I can't name as a content creator. And by that, I mean it was me who replied to messages from users. I used to get paid for message with bonuses for hitting certain message amounts. It was mostly horny guys who just wanted to chat and get off. But I met some interesting people. A guy in his 60s whose wife had died a few weeks prior. Hadn't had sex in years. Needed a release. Spoke at length with how he had picked me because I looked like his dead wife in her prime. A lot of guys who would agree to whatever weird fetish I dreamed up on that day. Horny people be horny. A lot of pedo. It was pretty scary what people would admit to with enough pushing. It all came to an end for me when a guy told me his dad had died that morning and he wouldn't be around for a while. I got review for my reply, which was, I'm really sorry for your loss. If you need to talk, I'll be here for you. They suggested that I should have replied, do you not care about me? I have needs to just realize that the site owners really just didn't care at all.
What's the weirdest thing you've seen happen at a friend's house that they thought was normal? When I was in about first grade, my best friend at the time had a lot of temper tantrums. We were having a sleepover, and I fell asleep in her bedroom in the middle of the night. I woke up in a different bed with her father. I was so confused, but he explained that she had a temper tantrum, and her mom went to sleep in her bed with her. So they moved me to the guest room. I was young and didn't understand. That's not normal, that he was sleeping in the same bed as me, just him and me. I told my parents when I went home the next day, and they were extremely concerned, asking me if he touched me, etc. I was highly confused because my pure, innocent mind didn't understand the concept of that low. Now, as an adult, I'm like, why didn't they just move me to the other room? Why did the dad have to get in bed with me? 3 women died and found themselves standing at the pearly gates. St. Peter said to the first woman, how many men did you sleep with in life? The first woman said, I only slept with one man, my husband, and I didn't sleep with him until after we were married. St. Peter turned to the angel standing next to him and said, give her the key to the silver room. The angel gave the woman a silver key, and the woman went into heaven with the key. Then St. Peter said to the second woman, how many men did you sleep with in life? I remained a virgin my whole life, for I was a nun, and I devoted my life to God. St. Peter turned to the angel and said, give her the key to the golden room. The angel gave the woman a golden key, and the woman went into heaven with the key. Then St. Peter said to the third woman, how many men did you sleep with in life? I slept with 13 men before I started dating my husband, 35 men while we were dating, 49 men while we were engaged, 56 men while we were married, and 28 men after he died. St. Peter turned to the angel and said, give her the key to my room. What secret could ruin your life? This secret came out a while ago, but it still hurts and is a big secret I've not told anyone. When I was a kid, I had asthma pretty bad. So, I'd be up all night, coughing constantly. My mom and I lived with her parents. We shared a room, so I slept in her bed often when I was a toddler. Mom would come home from work and lay down for bed, but I'd keep her awake with my coughing. Sometimes at night, I'd be coughing, and she would hug me so tight that I couldn't breathe. It would really distress me that I couldn't breathe, but I knew Mom loved me so much, and I didn't want to tell her she was literally squeezing me to death because I was afraid of hurting her feelings. So I'd just tell her that I loved her so much, and she would cry pretty hard after that. It took me years after having my own kid and treating him gently to figure out that it's actually pretty difficult to squeeze a kid so hard that they couldn't breathe. Mom is bipolar and has had other incidents of hurting people and abandoning those in her care that need medication and can't take care of themselves. So, I finally put it together and figured out Mom would be so agitated with my asthma that she would try to stop me from coughing by squeezing me almost to death, and then she would cry out of guilt when I told her I loved her. Today, my next-door pregnant neighbor knocked on my door. Around 7 p.m., I heard some knocking on my door and opened it to find my next-door pregnant neighbor standing there. She appeared to be in her 7th or 8th month of pregnancy. She was holding a small plate in her hand and spoke in a very shy voice, asking me if I could give her some of whatever I was cooking because she liked the smell. I think pregnant women sometimes have strong cravings that they cannot resist. Despite being shy, she apologized a lot for her request, probably because we don't know each other well. I laughed and reassured her that it was okay. I explained that I was cooking a traditional meal from my country, which included olive oil, garlic, jalapenos, and some spices, giving it a nice smell. I happily shared some of my dinner with her, and after thanking me, she left. As I watched her walk home, she reminded me of a cute little penguin, happy with her successful little hunting expedition. For some reason, I felt really happy too. Lawyers, what was your oh crap moment in court? I finished a murder trial. I was representing the defendant. The only defense I had was that there was no body found. I knew I was going to lose the case. So, for my closing argument, I looked at my watch and I told the jury, the victim is going to walk through that door in a minute. The entire jury looked over at the door, waiting for the person to walk through. Of course, the person did not walk through. I then told the jury, look, you had to have had some reasonable doubt that my client did it because you were waiting for the victim to walk through the door. That's it. That was my closing argument. Well, guess what? The jury came back with a guilty verdict. I asked the jury after what happened. I said, you all looked at the door. The jury said, yeah, we all did look at the door. But guess who did not? Your client. People who attended their high school reunion, what's the craziest transformation you've seen? Back in high school, we had a kid with Asperger's who was a little weird. However, he was amazing at the yo-yo, having picked one up during middle school after we had that yo-yo trick assembly. While everyone else stopped walking the dog by 8th grade, this guy was doing more and more elaborate tricks every day during lunch. He was bullied and teased, but he continued doing what he loved. At our 10-year reunion, people from every stratum of high school popularity were there, including this guy. He was his same old self, but more confident. I asked him if he still yo-yos, and he busted out his custom-made titanium yo-yo that he said he made on a CNC lathe. He then started to do some tricks, and a large crowd gathered around. It was quite the show. He had gotten very good. When he finished, people clapped and cheered. Even the jokester from back in the day fist-bumped him and told him how badass he was. The most amazing transformation was everyone else. Nobody teased him for being who he was anymore. They now admired him for being so passionate about something. Police officers, what was your biggest plot twist in the case? One time a friend of mine was having a really hard time controlling a pregnant lady he pulled over in a traffic stop. She had multiple felony warrants. He was trying to handcuff her but didn't want to physically manhandle her because of course she's pregnant. So he calls in for backup and waits for them as she is punching and screaming at him, trying to run away. She was a gangbanger and knew how to throw a punch or two. My friend just holds on to her arm the best he can while waiting for backup. Backup arrives around 2 to 3 minutes later and comes running over to them. Backup asks what's the problem and why he isn't taking her into custody more forcefully. My friend says, because she is pregnant and I don't want the baby to get hurt. The woman's eyes open wide and in the maddest voice possible, screams at him, I am not pregnant, you cunt motherfucker. She was then thrown on the ground, handcuffed and arrested with additional charges added to her warrants. Turns out she was just fat. What's the scariest thing about being a male? When I was a teenage boy, my sister fell into a river. My dad put his hand on my back and pushed me in after her, saying, go get her. Her leg was stuck on something, but I got it free and she swam back to shore. I, however, was pinned by branches under the water that had somehow gotten around me. There was a whole tree under the surface. I remember looking up to the water's surface and seeing the silhouettes of my family members walk away from the edge and thinking, no, wait. Long story short, my fight or flight system kicked in and I scrambled as hard as I could to free myself. Eventually, I got free and came up to take the best breath ever. When I was crawling back on the sand, my dad, sister, and brother were about 100 yards down the bank. He turned and said, "Come on," and I hurried after, while gagging on water. That about sums up my experience so far. People just expect you to be okay in obviously dangerous situations. I knew guys who drank themselves to death because liquor is easy, but saying I need help is hard. What's the dumbest reason you lost a friend? I was friends with someone for almost a decade, and she suddenly quit talking to me and ignoring me. After several weeks of this, I confronted her and asked her what was up. Why was she ignoring me? It turns out that the last time my kids had a sleepover at her house, all their stuff smelled like cat pee, and she decided that it meant that I let them live in filth. She decided that I was an abusive father, and she could no longer be friends with me. The reality was that my kids were so excited for the sleepover. They packed their bag the night before and put it in the living room. The bag was not fully closed, and at some point in the night, our cat climbed in the bag and peed on their stuff. We did not realize it because we just grabbed the bag on the way out and threw it in the trunk, but instead of calling us, she just decided I was a horrible person and never spoke to me again. The reason this whole thing was so stupid is that she had just been complaining to me 2 weeks prior about how their cat had recently been peeing on their fresh laundry. It never occurred to her that someone else's cat could randomly pee on something too. She just decided that I knew my kids' stuff smelled like cat and just didn't care. It was all just bizarre. As a teenager, what was the worst thing your parents ever walked in on you doing? It was the girl I was dating's birthday. I was doing some work during the day, then taking her out that evening. When I finished my work, I called her, told her I was going to jump in the shower, then head over. She suggests I bring clothes and we can have some fun in the shower together before going out. Sounds great. I get there and she greets me at the door nude. I end up sitting on her couch with her sitting on the floor going down on me. That is when her mom walked through the front door. It was the girl's apartment, but her mom was in the area, has a key, and decided to swing by and wish her happy birthday. She knew the girl had met me and was seeing me, but had no idea things had gotten this far. My girlfriend jumps up, grabs her mom, and pulls her into the bedroom where she proceeds to yell at her about barging into her apartment without knocking. I'm stuck in the living room, nude and harder than Chinese algebra, and my clothes are in the bedroom. I end up awkwardly covering up with a couch pillow, then nodding an even more awkward hello to her mom when she left. 2 weeks later, we went to her parents' house for dinner. Her mom walks up to me, hugs me, and says, "Good to meet you with pants on." It broke the ice, and we all had a good laugh about it. Police officers who have arrested other police officers. Story. This happened during my time as a United States Marine Corps military police officer. One day, I got a phone call from a fellow Marine's wife saying he was drunk and refusing to leave the house. When I arrived, I knocked on the front door but found him crying on the porch. His wife motioned for me to come inside through the glass door. She proceeded to show me red marks on her throat, a hole in the door that he had punched through beside her head, and other evidence that doesn't need to be disclosed. I asked him to come inside and get dressed, but he refused to leave with me. I wasn't going to handcuff him in front of his kid, but he decided to take that moment to run from me. I found him walking through a playground a couple of buildings over. When I caught up to him, he punched me, but I was able to take him into custody after a slight use of force. On the way to the station, he tried to kick out a window in my cruiser and told me I was ruining his life. He ended up getting charged with about 7 different offenses and was kicked out of the Marines. My slight inconvenience was totally worth it for him to face consequences for his actions. Lawyers. What the most unforgettable case you've ever worked on? I represented a black college student who was accused of shooting a white woman in a small conservative town. I was convinced he was innocent and that the actual shooter was her boyfriend, but I knew proving it was going to be hard. The jury was all white, and the woman's boyfriend was not only a well-respected and liked figure in the town, but also a witness. Despite the odds stacked against us, I owed it to my client to prove his innocence, so I worked my butt off to prepare. Once the trial started, I quickly realized I was more than ready and began knocking down every piece of evidence the state presented. I tore up the boyfriend while he was on the stand, even managing to back him into a corner and get him to admit that he indeed thought his girlfriend deserved to die for what she did to him. I gave a 30-minute closing argument without even looking at my notes, with the jury nodding along to everything I said. They were out for 20 minutes and came back with a not guilty verdict. My client's mom hugged me in tears immediately after the trial ended, and even though it has been over a decade, the guy still calls me up once a year to check up on me. Little Johnny wakes up one night, hearing noises from his parents' bedroom. He opens the door to his parents' room and sees Mom handcuffed to the bed's headboard, Dad ramming her from behind. Johnny screams. Dad turns to looks at him, laughs, and gives Mom a slap on the bum for good measure. Johnny runs away, screaming. Once Dad has finished Mom off, he uncuffs her. She immediately says, "You better go tell Johnny everything is okay. The shit he just saw could scar him for life." Dad rolls his eyes. and begrudgingly agrees. Pulls on his robe and heads for Johnny's room, only to find it's empty. He then heads for the TV room, but when he passes the guest room, he notices the door is ajar, noises coming from inside. He opens the door to look in and sees Granny on her hands and knees, little Johnny fucking her from behind. Dad screams. Johnny turns around, looks at him and says, "Yeah, not so funny when it's your mom, huh?" A lost dog strays into a jungle. A lion sees this from a distance and says with caution, "This guy looks edible, never seen his kind before." So the lion starts rushing towards the dog with menace. The dog notices and starts to panic, but as he's about to run, he sees some bones next to him and gets an idea and says loudly, that was some good lion meat." The lion abruptly stops and says, "Whoa, this guy seems tougher." Then he looks, "I better leave while I can." Over by the treetop, a monkey witnessed everything. The monkey realizes he can benefit from this situation by telling the lion and getting something in return. So the monkey proceeds to tell the lion what really happened, and the lion says angrily, "Get on my back, we'll get him together." So they start rushing back to the dog. The dog sees them and realizes what happened and starts to panic even more. He then gets another idea and shouts, "Where the hell is that monkey? I told him to bring me another lion an hour ago." When did the class clown take it too far? Junior year in high school in algebra. The teacher was kind of a douche, so this one guy, let's call him Mike, would give him a hard time. This was a regular thing, and Mike would get kicked out of class for saying and doing some inappropriate stuff, but we all thought it was hilarious. One day, our teacher didn't show up to class. Word got around that his oldest son had died of a drug overdose, and he had to take some personal time off. He didn't show back up until a week later, and he looked really sullen and down during class. Mike pulled out a can of Coca-Cola and started sipping it nonchalantly. Teacher had a strict no eating or drinking in class policy, and Mike was aware of this. He told Mike to throw it away and step outside. Mike, the absolute savage, says, "Look, I know you don't like Coke, but I'm sure your son did." Nobody laughed, just silence. Some people didn't get it. The ones who did were just too shocked to say anything like me. Mike threw his drink away and walked out of the classroom while the teacher just sort of haphazardly continued his lesson.
911 operators. What are some of the funniest things someone is calling for? It was Father's Day, mind you. Had this 5-year-old kid calling at least 6 times that he'd never stay on the line long enough for us to get a good ping on his cell phone. We were finally able to get him to stay on the phone long enough by talking about how his teddy bear was sick. We asked to speak to his parents, and he told us they were in bed and the door was locked. So we asked him to go knock on the door. He then told us he had been locked in his room. Okay, I think we know what's going on now. By this point, we had an officer en route to this kid's house to go make sure everything was okay. The officer arrives on scene a few minutes go by. Then the officer comes over the radio and says S-120 back in service. The teddy bear's 10-4. The officer made his way up to the comm center and proceeded to tell us all that the kid's dad answered the door wearing only boxer shorts and was more than a little agitated when he found out his son had been calling 911. Apparently, the dad had been getting his Father's Day gift from mom when the officer showed up.
Reddit. What's your favorite no way story? My cousin and a group of close friends were spending a weekend in a cabin. On the drive up, they heard over the radio that a summer camp had subsequently lost one of the kids. They shrugged it off and continued on with their trip. The next night, they were sitting around the campfire, having a good time drinking and reminiscing about old times. About 3 hours later, one of their friends got it in his head that there were trolls in the woods, and he was going to find one, no matter how long it took. From the point of view of Mr. Troll Hunter, he said he got about a good mile into the woods before he found one. He threw the troll over his shoulder and headed back to camp. When he got back to the cabin, everyone had already gone to bed. He took the troll into his room, shut the door, and passed out. The next morning, he woke up to find a 9-year-old kid with Down syndrome staring up at him. He freaked out, decided he had to call the cops, and told them he found the missing kid. A few weeks later, he was in the paper and was awarded a key to the city for his heroism. What's the craziest butterfly effect that happened to you because of a small decision you made? My desire for pizza set off a chain reaction that destroyed my family. One day, got home from school and really wanted pizza. Family was poor, so spontaneous food trips weren't always in the cards. Really worked my pouty face to my mom and begged to go to the local pizza place for dinner. She said all right. While chilling there, I saw my uncle walk by, and I was like, "Da fuck, Uncle X, is that you?" Now you might say, well, he wanted pizza. What's the big deal? Well, he lived several states away, so to arbitrarily be in town and not tell anyone was strange. Turned out he was having an affair with his sister-in-law, my aunt, on the other side of the family. She was basically a money-grubbing whore, and the family protested. One thing led to another, and everyone hates each other now, and we haven't had contact in like 20 years. I just wanted some pizza. What is socially accepted when you are beautiful, but not accepted when you are ugly? Literally just existing and talking to people. There's a guy at work named Sean. Sean is unfortunate looking. He's a redhead. He's balding, yet his sides and back are pretty long. He doesn't cut his nose hairs. He's constantly red/pink pot-bellied. And yeah, he kind of lingers around your desk and talks a bit too much. Problem is, we all kind of do that. You know, overstaying your cubicle visit or whatever. Everyone at work thinks he's creepy. They all think he'll shoot up the place, or maybe we'll eventually be banned from entering the school zone. Sean is a sweet, nice dude. He's your nerdy 40-year-old virgin type of dude. He's got a lot of friends, from what I can tell on Facebook, and practically zero work friends. He plays on different softball and bowling teams, goes out to bars with his friends, and from what I can tell, seems perfectly normal. I talk to him every so often, and he's a really nice guy. I visited his desk and he said I was the first person to visit him. It's very unfortunate for him that people think of him this way. A boy brought home his report card to show his parents how well he did in math class. His report card showed a 90/100 for his math grade. His father was ecstatic. However, his mother knew he was terrible at math and thus simply couldn't believe he got a 90/100. She looked closely at the report card and noticed that the 9 and the 0 looked to have different handwriting styles. She immediately became suspicious. "Son, tell me, did you add a 0 to the end of your grade?" "No," the boy replied. "I'm going to ask you again," said the mom. "Did you add the 0 yourself?" "No, Mom, I didn't add the 0. Fuming, the mom cuts him off. "Okay, since you're not telling me the truth, you are grounded for 1 month." "No, Mom, please," the boy begged. "I swear I didn't add the 0. "This is your last chance," said the mom. "Tell me the truth." "I didn't add the 0, I added the 9. Lawyers, what's the most petty behavior you've seen from parents? Father wanted full custody of his child. Child was in full mother's custody. Child has diabetes. Both parents must fill a daily glucose intake measured by glucometer. Every time father dropped the child at mom's, he would buy a Snickers or Twix on the way there and feed it to the kid. Then we flipped out the glucose measurings during court. Due to the measurings being extremely high when the child was at mom's, we were able to get the child to the father's full custody. I didn't know what he was doing. I certainly didn't advise him to do it. He just bring it to the courthouse and ordered me to present it. Either that or that time where during divorce a guy had exact knowledge of how many toilet paper sheets his wife was overusing and how many liters of warm water she overused. Have you ever had a close friend cross the line in your relationship? My best friend of 5 years began nightly, belittling me over a group chat. I was having a really hard time in life, but he found humor in making me a public joke. He crossed the line, not when he told me that my issues were stupid and that if I was serious, I should just kill myself. Not when he wrote a letter to my boss telling him to fire me because I couldn't give him proper time. Not when he threatened to call a lawyer on me and sue me for blocking him on Facebook, but when he posted my address and phone number on Craigslist saying I was ready for a hookup and that the men should just come right in. Yes, I did go to the police and got a cease and desist. His mother reached out to me and asked me what even happened. I told her I couldn't handle him belittling me over a nightly chat. Turns out his mother never contacted me. He logged into her Facebook account and screenshot what I said and told me that what I'm doing is defamation of character because I'm attempting to make him look bad in his mother's eyes. What things do guys do that are unbelievably sexy without them knowing it? My boyfriend and I were out on a weekend trip, and on our way back, my Jeep got a flat tire. He rolled up his sleeves, and as he started loosening the lug nuts, his biceps flexed in a way that I couldn't help but notice. It was like something out of a movie. The way he effortlessly handled the tire iron, making it look so easy, had my heart racing. My knees practically gave out, and I could barely stand up straight as I watched him work. There was just this undeniable confidence about him that made me weak in the knees. He didn't say much, just, "What about fixing the flat tire?" with a calm determination that was incredibly sexy. When he finished, I obviously gave him a reward. What's your worst "I know this looks bad, but I can explain" moment? A female friend of mine who is a police officer was on a welfare check and was bit by the property owner's dog. She was about a mile from my house when bit, and because I am an emergency medical technician, she decided to call me to see if I could inspect where she was bitten and advise if she needed to go to the hospital. She show up at my house and limps into the kitchen, telling me the dog bit her just below her left butt cheek on the rear of her upper thigh. I was worried that the bite had broke the skin and she would need to get it bandaged and possibly get a rabies shot. I told her that I would have to take a look at the bite to help her sew. She takes off her duty belt and pulls her pants down to around her knees to expose the bite area. It didn't look too bad, but there were 2 spots where the dog's teeth had broke the skin. I told her I would bandage it up so she could make the 20-minute drive to the clinic. I was just about to bandage her leg when my wife walks through the door. There I am with one of our female friends standing in our kitchen in her police officer uniform, pants down. She was wearing a thong. I was sitting, so basically her ass was in my face and my hands on her upper thigh/butt. We both had the deer in the headlights stare as we realized how bad this must have looked to my wife. We then both shouted out in unison, "It was a dog bite." What scary gut feeling did you have that turned out to be true? I went to a mall in my hometown 2 weeks ago to redeem a gift voucher I got from my parents about 3 years ago. I parked in the basement and walked up to the doors, where a guy wearing a staff uniform was waiting and opened the door for me. As I stepped inside, he joined me and pressed the button to go to a certain floor without asking me where I'm going. As the door started closing, my gut told me to get the fuck out because something is off about this guy. I stepped out, pretending that I forgot something in the car. The guy didn't follow me out. I decided that it was nothing and shouldn't stress about it, so up I went to the 3rd floor. As I stepped out, a bunch of security guards came running toward the lift and chased me out and took the lift to the next floor. I asked one of the people what happened and no one knew. Maybe 10 minutes later, there was an announcement saying that the 5th floor in the elevators on that side of the mall is closed due to security reasons. Turned out that the guy who was with me in the lift slashed the next guy, who entered his neck with a carpenter's knife, unaliving him and tried to attack the security guards when the doors opened. My gut really saved me.
People who work in retail, what's the saddest thing someone ever returned? I used to be a manager for a Disney store. We had a regular old man come in with his wife regularly. Super cute couple. I mean, matching outfits, holding hands, just cute as could be. We used to sell these huge stuffed animals, like ginormous. The couple came in about once a week and would just walk around laughing, smile, buy things here and there. One night he came in on his own and bought one of these gigantic Mickeys we had. It was $300, I think. He was so excited. He told us all about how he was going to take her out to dinner and it would be sitting there on the bed to surprise her when they got home. 2 days later, he walked back in carrying the gigantic Mickey Mouse plush to return. He had bought it to surprise her for her 75th birthday. She passed away in her sleep the day before her birthday. He thanked us and said goodbye, and that he would not be coming back because our store reminded him too much of his wife. We found out he passed away a week later, just 7 days from the day his wife passed. They were such amazing people. Breaks my heart just thinking about it.
What made the high school legend become a legend? We had a teacher who was infamous for not letting you go to the bathroom no matter what. I mean, so much so that if you accidentally started your period in class, she'd make you wait. This actually happened. So there was a girl who we'll call Katie in class who tended to be a bit of a troublemaker. Katie hated that teacher because she begged to go to the bathroom and got shut down every time at the end of the year. Katie asked one more time to go to the bathroom. The teacher said no. Katie asked another time. 5 minutes later, the teacher said no again. 5 minutes after that, Katie asked again. The teacher hit the roof and said that if she said one more thing, Katie would be sent to the principal. Katie shrugged and said, "This is on you then," and pissed on her seat right where she was. The teacher sent her to the principal, who called her parents, one of which was a urologist. Her father yelled at the principal. The teacher ended up in deep shit. According to other kids, she never denied another kid the bathroom again.
My best friend falsely accused me of having a crush on her husband. My best friend Sarah and her husband Matt have put me in a tough spot with my fiancé Jack. I've known Matt since we were kids. He was my neighbor. Sarah and I became close in college when we were roommates. When I introduced Sarah and Matt, they hit it off and started dating. I was happy for them, but often felt left out as they got closer. After college, Matt stopped being friends with me, which hurt, but I stayed close to Sarah. We hung out often, but I didn't talk much to Matt except for saying hello. Sometimes Sarah tried to arrange double dates, but Matt had become rude and mean to me. Still, for Sarah's sake, I ignored it because he was a good husband to her. When Jack and I got engaged, we didn't plan a party, which disappointed Sarah. So she organized a small gathering at her place to celebrate us. As the night ended, Matt, who had been drinking, shocked me by saying in front of Jack that I had a crush on him and was glad I was finally settling down. I denied it, but he laughed it off, making me feel embarrassed. Sarah just said to ignore him because he was drunk and trusted that I wouldn't act on any crush. Jack got really upset and left without listening to me. Since then, he hasn't talked to me or answered my calls. I've tried talking to Sarah to clear things up with Jack, but she's been avoiding me. I don't get why they'd believe Matt's nonsense after all I've done for Sarah. I feel humiliated that they think I liked Matt. Now I need to convince Jack it's not true, and I'm not sure where I stand with Sarah anymore. The rest of the story is on my channel and linked below.
When did the popular kid's life fall apart in a few seconds? His dad pass away. It was really shitty. Before that, he was not only popular but also smart, motivated, a great athlete, and actually a great guy in person. As much as you can be till you are 15. The guy and his dad were really close as he lost his mother when he was maybe 2 or 3. His dad used to drop him at the school. They used to go out together every weekend. They had really good bond. We all used to say that they had the ideal father and son connection. Then his dad died right before he was going to have a football game. Heart attack in the shower before they were going to leave for it. We heard about it later, and basically from there, everything seemed to decline. He became angry, as you could expect, and I think looking back, you'd expect a decline in everything at first, but he just spiraled deeper and deeper. He dropped out of school and became addicted to painkillers. We didn't see him for a while. When I did catch up with him later in a club, he'd been so into drugs, his brain literally seemed fried. It was sad for every reason. Two mischievous boys, aged 8 and 10, are known for causing all sorts of trouble in their town. Their mother, hoping to discipline them, asks a preacher to speak to them. The preacher agrees, but he asks to see the boys individually. The preacher, a huge man with a booming voice, sits the younger boy down and asks sternly, "Do you know where God is, son?" The boy's mouth drops open. He doesn't respond, but sits there wide-eyed with his mouth hanging open. So the preacher repeats the question in an even sterner tone, "Where is God?" The boy lowers his gaze, but does not answer. The preacher raises his voice further, shakes his finger in the boy's face, and bellows, "Where is God?" The boy screams and runs directly home and dives into his closet, slamming the door behind him. When his older brother finds him in the closet, he asks, "What happened? Why are you shaking?" Gasping for breath, the younger brother replies, "We are in big trouble this time. God is missing, and they think we did it." A blonde boards a plane to New York. Seeing that the first-class seats appear to be much larger and more comfortable, she moves forward to the last empty seat in first class. The flight attendant checks her ticket and tells the woman that her seat is in economy. The blonde replies, "I'm young and beautiful, and have never had this problem before. I'm going to sit here until we get to New York." Flustered, the flight attendant goes to the cockpit and informs the captain. The captain goes back and tells the woman that her assigned seat is in economy. Again, the blonde replies, in exactly the same way. The captain doesn't want to cause a commotion, and so returns to the cockpit to discuss the problem with the co-pilot. The co-pilot says that he has a blonde girlfriend and that he can take care of the problem. He then goes back and briefly whispers something in the blonde's ear. She immediately gets up and says, "Thank you so much. Now I understand." The pilot and flight attendant, who was watching with rapt attention, asked the co-pilot what he had said to the woman. He replies, "I just told her that the first-class section isn't going to New York." What absolutely shouldn't be passed around friends. I once lived in a house with 6 other friends. Cheap rent, good roommates. We had parties every weekend with 50+ people. Life was good. A buddy of ours was very homophobic. His parents said they would disown him if he was gay. One of the guys in the house who knew him the best bought a pink suction cup glow-in-the-dark dildo. The idea was to stick it to the front of his truck. He would either have to touch it to get it off or leave it, at which point we would laugh at him. We thought it was funny, but it never happened because he moved a couple of days after it was bought. So ultimately, we just had it around the house and would mess with each other. Fall asleep on the couch. You get a pic taken with a dildo in your mouth. We stuck it to the wall and hung Christmas decorations on it. We hid it in the cupboards, placing it just right, so that if you opened the cupboard, it would fall out at you. We all got pretty good at throwing it at a wall and getting it to stick. Some kids had Elf on a shelf. We had Pink Dink in the sink. We had rotating roommates as some people started moving out and starting their lives after college, until I was the last to leave. I left it in the shower on the last day I moved out with a note. "This is Pink Dink. He may be small, but he can bring so much joy to the world if you use him properly. All friend groups should have their own Pink Dink."
People no longer on speaking terms with their former best friends for life. What happened? This happened when I was 17, my boyfriend was 20, my best friend was 18. I had dated him for 3 years at that point, and my best friend vehemently hated him the entire time. One day she told me my boyfriend had been texting her, and they had plans to meet up that afternoon to have sex, but she couldn't and had to tell me. We went over to his place. She went in first, and I told her to text me when he started making moves. I get the text, knock on his door. He opens and says, "You shouldn't be here," before slamming the door in my face. I knock again, and I say, "I know she's in there. We came together. It's over. We leave together." And that was it for me and him. It was over for her and I when she started dating him a week later. 7 years of friendship gone like that. She was a snake. I guess it was jealousy, or maybe they had been hooking up together long before that. I'm not sure. They aren't together anymore, but they lead similar, unhappy lives. I am with a good man who loves me, and we have been together 6 years now.
A driver was pulled over for speeding. The cop approaches and says, "Do you know how fast you were going?" The driver replies, Yeah, make it quick. I just robbed a bank, and I just lost those cops a few miles back." "Really?" As the cop starts taking notes. "All by yourself?" "Nah, I had a partner, but I shot him. He's in the trunk. I also have to smuggle the 20 kilo of cocaine next to him soon, so can you just please hurry up?" "Yeah, I'm calling for backup." The cop takes the driver's keys and puts him in handcuffs 10 minutes later. 2 squad cars each with a pair of officers arrive and inspect the man's vehicle. They kept looking and looking, but they couldn't find the money, corpse, nor the cocaine. One of the latter cops, the sergeant, goes to the driver to apologize. "I'm sorry to inconvenience you, sir, but our man told us you robbed a bank, killed a man, and was about to smuggle coke. What? I assure you that a God-fearing man like me will never do any abhorrent deed. Yes, our mistake. I bet that bastard also said I was speeding. What was the biggest plot twist in your life? I married a girl who implied she would unalive herself if she was without me. I hopped on a cavalcade of abuse and infidelity for 10 years, punctuated with her stints in the institution. I was so stressed out by her that I would literally get heart palpitations before she came home from any of these days. Luckily, I was bailed out when she fell in love with her best friend and took off. I filed for divorce, which took another year because my spiteful ex wanted to punish me by delaying her signature. Borderline personality disorder is not fun. There is a happy ending. However, the divorce finally went through, and I decided to take a little town vacation. I got a nice hotel room and treated myself to an elaborate dinner. When I had finished my fantastic meal, I gushed to the waiter that it was the best I'd ever eaten. She told me that the chef was available if I wanted to meet her. Being the Irish caviar that I am, I gladly accepted. A few minutes later, the chef came to my table, and we had what could only be described as a love at first sight moment. I'm not even sure what we said to each other, if anything, at first. I asked if she was free after her shift, and we have been together ever since. The nun teaching Sunday school was speaking to her class one morning, and she asked the question, "When you die and go to heaven, which part of your body goes first?" Susie raised her hand and said, "I think it's your hands." "Why do you think it's your hands, Susie?" Susie replied, "Because when you pray, you hold your hands together in front of you, and God just takes your hands first." "What a wonderful answer," the nun said. Little Johnny raised his hand and said, "Sister, I think it's your feet." The nun looked at him with the strangest look on her face. "Now, Johnny, why do you think it would be your feet?" Little Johnny said, "Well, I walked into Mommy and Daddy's bedroom the other night. Mommy had her legs straight up in the air and she was saying, 'Oh God, I'm coming.' I gotta tell you, if Dad hadn't pinned her down, we'd have lost her."
What are your cringy I'm not like other girls stories that you're embarrassed about? I always loved dolls and dressing up as a kid. I would spend my free time playing with dolls. But when I went to school, I would scoff at the other girls for playing with dolls. I wanted to be seen as tough and cool for my 10th birthday. My parents worked together to build me some doll furniture. Dad did a lot of woodworking and Mom was good with a sewing machine. Together, they created a cool little wardrobe and bed set for my dolls. They were painted white and had little flower stickers for decoration. I just about cried when I opened my presents, but my friend was sitting right beside me, and I knew if I told my parents I loved the presents, my friend would know I liked dolls. My lies would be undone. So I said, "Thanks, but I don't like dolls. They're for babies." My parents looked so sad. I'm 25 years old and I still feel so guilty 15 years later. A few years ago, I got drunk at a family gathering and I sobbed my dad and apologized for what I said and told him I loved the present. He knew.
A woman goes to the doctor, worried about her husband's temper. The doctor asks, "What's the problem?" The woman says, "Doctor, I don't know what to do. Every day my husband seems to lose his temper for no reason. It scares me." The doctor says, "I have a cure for that. When it seems that your husband is getting angry, just take a glass of water and start swishing it in your mouth. Just swish and swish. But don't swallow it until he either leaves the room or calms down." 2 weeks later, the woman comes back to the doctor, looking fresh and reborn. The woman says, "Doctor, that was a brilliant idea. Every time my husband started losing it, I swish with water. I swish, and he calmed right down." How does a glass of water do that? The doctor says the water itself does nothing. It's keeping your mouth shut. That does the trick. How far did you go in a game of truth or dare? At a friend's house for a sleepover when I was maybe 12 or so. Just me, my brother, and the friend playing truth or dare, really just dare, because truth is lame AF. We were doing the typical shit, making drinks out of condiments and other stuff to chug, putting household items in the freezer, etc. When I was hit with a effing dare bomb, sneak into his sister's room, who was a few years younger than us, go to a personal bathroom, take a shit and leave it. Ninja shit, I'm down. So I left a monster log in her toilet and sneakily waddled back out to the main bathroom to wipe. Can't have toilet paper obstructing the view of that beautiful brown python. The next morning, we woke up to screams. I got a very stern talking to, but I know both my friend's dad and my dad were laughing inside. Also, I was strictly forbidden from entering her room. Totally worth it. What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? Graduated law and got engaged to the girl I had been with through university. We both applied for the same graduate program and ended up working in the same office in Canberra. 3 months before our wedding, I found out she was cheating on me with our mutual boss, and I broke it off with her. Long story short, it got really, really ugly, and the two of us ended up in a very bitter court case over property. Canberra is a pretty small city, and the legal world is pretty bloody small there too. And everywhere I went, I bumped into my ex. It was beginning to seriously get me down her her too, as it transpired, and I applied for an Australian government overseas development job in Tuvalu, a Pacific island with about 11,000 population. It's quite a prestigious job to get with only 2 positions offered for a 2-year contract on a rotating basis. I was successful in the application and moved on island to start my posting to discover that my ex was the other successful applicant. I spent the next 2 years sharing a tiny office on a tiny island with a person that I quite honestly loved more than any other in the world. What made the high school legend become a legend? Our history teacher was ex-military and he was absolutely jacked. Like this, I would bike 10 miles every morning to school, kept an ab roller in his classroom, would eat salads and beans for lunch every day, the whole shebang. Anyway, one day he gives our class a pop quiz. Jeff, the strongest, biggest guy in my class, goes up to him and asks, "If I can punch you in the stomach and make you flinch, the entire class gets a 100 on the quiz." My teacher took him up on it. He prepared himself, and Jeff absolutely drills him in the stomach. Our teacher did not flinch. We still had to take the quiz, but Jeff went down in history as the guy who punched a teacher, and the teacher went down in history as a guy you don't want to effing mess with. Justiça, class of 1969 at my high school. The guy didn't exist. He was created by a group of my friends as a mid-year transfer student with a totally fabricated deep background that was so smooth. Joe even made the yearbook with a picture unavailable caption. Lawyers of Reddit. What's the most ridiculous argument you've heard in court? One of my clients got busted cooking meth. This was a very clear-cut case. They actually caught him in the middle of a cook. No way he was getting out of this one. Even worse, he was cooking at home and children were there. Yep, the DA loaded him up with felonies, there was no bail, and he was being held in the county jail. My client knew he was f***ed. He had been planning to get married a few weeks after he got busted. My client asks me if he can get released for 24 hours so he can still get married. I tell him that I'll ask, but that there's no way in f***ing hell they'll let him out. First, I ask the DA if they will allow it. Nope, they laugh. So I file a motion with the court. Now, I knew the judge was a crusty old conservative family values kind of guy who also has a raging erection for drug crime. There was no law involved, but I put together an argument about the sanctity of marriage and how the state should encourage marriage at all times and that sort of thing. We have a hearing and I make the argument. The DA is totally opposed and calls it ridiculous, and the judge grants it. The judge actually decided to allow my client out for 24 hours to get married. He had to surrender at the county jail at 8 a.m. the next day and some other conditions, but still, he was allowed out. Everyone is stunned. Nobody can believe it. The day of the wedding comes, my client gets out, gets married, then goes back to the jail. Everything went exactly like how it was supposed to, which is also pretty shocking.
What is your "we will never speak of this again" moment? I got up one night to get some water and found that my teenage son was in the kitchen getting food. He was behind the kitchen counter, so I could only see him from the waist up. When he came around the counter into the hall, 2 things happened simultaneously. He noticed me and his eyes grew wide in horror, and I saw that he was butt naked except for a pair of socks. He starts trying to panic, run backwards on the tile floor. Imagine Scooby-Doo trying to run, but getting stuck in place in a flurry of limbs, but ended up slipping and taking a hard seat on the tile. Worst of all, he dropped his hot pocket. I made sure he was okay, then went back to bed and laughed my ass off. He didn't make an eye contact with me for like next 5 days. Years later, we were driving and reminiscing about funny memories. I said, "Do you remember that night?" And he cut me off with, "Yes." I didn't even have to specify which night we knew, and we were silent.
What happened at your work, which caused multiple people to all quit at once? When I was 16, I worked in the concession stand at a minor league baseball stadium. Minimum wage at the time was $5.15 per hour. This job paid $8, and it was always in the evenings, so it was perfect work. The only bad thing was our management was terrible. One night, the stadium was running a promotion, and it was incredibly busy. We all cleaned as we worked, but nobody had a chance to do thorough cleaning for the whole shift because of the never-ending horde of hungry baseball fans. The manager showed up and throws the biggest tantrum ever over the unswept floor. She announces, "Listen up, you lazy people. Minimal work gets minimal pay. Everybody is being paid minimum wage tonight because you slobs won't clean up anything." Both of our bartenders in the bar back quit on the spot, which caused a chain reaction. We all took off our aprons and hats to leave. She blocked the exit and was red in the face from screaming. So one of the cooks climbed out of one of the big serving windows where we served customers. So I did the same, and most of the staff followed. People who have outrun cops, how do you do it? I was hanging out at friend's house when my mom texted me to inform me that my girlfriend is on her way back from college to surprise me. Extremely happy, but shocked because my girlfriend hated this dude, so I prefer not to tell her that I was at this friend's place. Had recently told her I was home. I call my mom to ask, when will she be home? She said, any time now. And I freaked out. I ran out of this friend's house without informing him that I'm leaving. I jump in the car and start flying home on a road I should definitely not be flying on. As God fated, I pass a cop and see him hit his brakes in my rear view. I instinctively floor it over the hill, pull into a parking lot, and cut my lights off nighttime. Few seconds pass, and I see him fly by with his wee-woos on. With no time to spare, I pulled back out soon after and finished flying home. Run inside, jerk my clothes off, lay on the couch, turn on the TV, and she knocks on the door. Not 5 seconds later, mission accomplished. Not yet. As soon as she answers, Mom asks me, "When did you come home?" Has your class ever made the teacher cry? What happened? Angry tears. Had a history teacher one year, really good teacher. He had a teenage son who had unalived himself, and after he took some time off, he came back to work. Standard class clown kid started acting up in his class. Teacher asks him to go into the hallway so he can speak with him privately. We heard their exchange get a little heated, but this kid just cranked it to 11 and insinuated teacher's kid was right to unalive themselves with a father like him. Heard that kid bounce off some lockers about a second after. Teacher came back into the room with angry tears and told one of us to call the school resource officer. It became a big hullabaloo and teacher ended up suspended for the rest of the year. At the time, I thought it was crazy he'd shove that kid like that. 15 years later and some real-world experience, I'm surprised that's all he did.
Survivors of attempted murder. What's your story? I was 16 and asleep when I just felt something wrong. I rolled over to see someone who looked like my father standing beside my bed. I said, "Dad." That's when he jumped on the bed and shoved his hand into my panties and into me. And at first I went into shock, thinking my own father was doing this. He then started choking me hard, and I realized it wasn't my father. I started fighting back, managing to get my knee into his groin. His hands fell away from my throat and I screamed like never before. He paused, unsure of whether or not to stay or to leave. After a few seconds of contemplating, he drove out my window. I was so incensed. I chased him to the window and kept screaming at him. Hours later, I noticed an extension cord was out of place in my room. I pulled it out from around the corner of my bed, and the end had been fashioned into a noose big enough to fit around my head. So it was finally then that 16-year-old me realized this man who broke in and had intended to actually strangle me to death. And for whatever reason, I had woken up in time to catch him before he got that far.
Gamers of Reddit, what are the strangest things you've heard over an open mic? Was getting full-on cussed out by a kid easily around 5 or 6. He was literally saying, "F you, you effing I hope Satan blinks your eyes and a splurge gets in your spit eyes, your stupid little ass." So we started firing back at him with everything we had. We kind of made him cry. Then his mom gets on the mic and starts yelling at us. She's telling us how we are setting a bad example for her child, and we shouldn't be using that kind of language around someone his age. So we went off on her to explain that her kid was being a sailor-mouthed little bit. She started yelling at us, saying that our kid can do whatever he wants. So we said that if he's going to talk shit like an adult, then he's going to have shit talk back to him, like as an adult. She gets even more pissed. This is the best effing part. I'm still laughing about this. The effing grandmother gets on the mic and starts spouting off to us. She's saying that her daughter is a fantastic mother and we need to leave them alone or she's going to call the police. We managed to piss the kid off so bad that we got yelled at by 3 generations of that family in the span of a few minutes. God, it was fantastic. What was it your little one said that left you speechless? My son asked in front of a black man, "Why do you have chocolate skin?" The man told my son, "That's God's favorite flavor, so I'm lucky." My son agreed with him. There was also a time when my cousin was a preschooler. He was waiting in a doctor's office when a black man walked in. My little cousin piped up with, "Look at the dirty man." Before my aunt could apologize, the man said, "Young man, this is what happens if you don't take a bath every night like your mom tells you to." He was a sweetheart and apparently very comfortable in his own skin. My aunt was quick to tell my cousin that the man was joking and that was his natural color. My cousin was begging to have a skin color change as they left the office. What is the worst thing a woman has done on a first date? Right before I went out with her, I checked her Twitter and she was live tweeting everything. She was tweeting about her preparation and arrival to meet me, and so on. Throughout the entire date, she was constantly typing on her phone. At that point, I had already concluded that the date was over in my mind. However, I purposely made it even more awkward to see how she would react by the time we finished dinner and drinks. I had made it so uncomfortable and awkward in her tweets. Her tweets were just hilarious. We got up and walked outside and I said, "I guess there's no chance of a second date." She asked, "What do you mean?" I replied, "Well, you tweeted 17 minutes ago that you're definitely not going out with this guy again." She looked wide-eyed and surprised. I told her that within 5 minutes of the date, she had tweeted 3 times, and it was incredibly disrespectful to me. So I intentionally made it the worst day possible. She tried to apologize, and I accepted it, but I didn't want to see her again. I told her to keep her phone in her pocket on her next date. She learned something valuable that day. Picking up my girlfriend's blind brother couldn't have been better. So my girlfriend sent me a picture of him, and when I got to the school, he was already waiting for me at the entrance. I just approached him and told him who I was before I could say anything else. He asked me shyly if it was okay to grab my arm. That was a win already, because I didn't have to offer anything. When we were getting closer to the car, I told him an estimated amount of steps I counted lol, so he could get in by himself. I think it was the right move because he smiled. On the way back, I asked him about music. I was ready with everything. "Thanks, girlfriend." And we clicked. We talked about music, hobbies, school, cool, you name it. He was super talkative and nice. But what sealed the deal, I think, was that we were discussing something and I was so into it that I said without thinking, "You don't see the difference." I was like, "Stone." But then I remembered a comment saying it was okay to use verbs like that and prayed to all the gods who didn't take it bad. So I looked at him and he was silently laughing. I breathed again and he continued as if nothing happened. When we got to the house, he grabbed my arm again and thanked me for being so cool and treating him like anyone else. I almost cry. He is such a cool dude. I hope I can get to pick him up some more times. Lawyers, have you ever defended someone who was actually framed? Yes, by a 12-year-old. I defended a man who was accused of child molestation by a 12-year-old girl. I will call her Becky for no particular reason. Becky was the daughter of the man's girlfriend. She did not like him and made up a story about him. I was fortunate in that my investigator found several of Becky's schoolmates who agreed to testify that Becky had told them she didn't like her mom's boyfriend and had asked for suggestions. One of the other girls admitted that the molestation story was originally hers. Becky liked it and made it her own, seeking their input and changing the story to make it more convincing. I suggested that the district attorney should have them interviewed. Fortunately, he did. And once the truth was brought out, the charges were dismissed. What did a teacher do that made you automatically gain respect for them? When I was in the first grade, my mother gave me one of many really awful haircuts. The first day back at school afterward, the kids picked on me horribly so much that I ran out and hid. The principal found me, and we went back to the classroom, and he asked me to wait outside for a minute while he talked to the class. He then walked me to his office and bought me a Coke. The next day, first thing in the morning, we had an assembly with the entire school, and he walked up on stage with his head shaved, completely bald, and talked about bullying and the like. Some 20 years down the road, he had retired, and I ran into him at the local college, shook his hand and said, "You probably don't remember me, but yes, I do." He interrupted and said my name in the event. The man was is a hero in my eyes.
Gamers of Reddit, what are the strangest things you've heard over an open mic? I have legitimately heard someone on my team break up with a girl during a game of Call of Duty on voice chat. He was using open mic, and she was like, "Get off that stupid game and take me out to dinner," in this horribly entitled voice. After around 10 minutes of him being calm and saying things like, "It's okay, baby. Just let me finish this game. I will get punished if I leave," and her just not understanding, she issued an ultimatum. "If you don't turn that game off right now and take me to dinner, I am leaving." He just typed in chat, "Pause please, need to break up with my GF," and everyone laughed and paused. The dude just went ballistic. "This is my apartment. You stay here on my dime. I buy you all your food. I give you money to go shopping. You don't get to issue ultimatums to me when you don't have anything without me. Get out of my apartment. This relationship is over." Then it was lots of her crying and yelling and bringing up all the things he did wrong in the past as if that was going to help. Eventually, he just said, "Sorry, the relationship is over. I don't care. Bring a truck and one of those douchebag bar guys you love to fuck so much to get your stuff tomorrow. See if any of them are willing to clothe, feed, house, and you." Everyone on voice chat just went, "Oh," and we were typing everything that was happening to the enemy team. He eventually got her out of the apartment, and boy, did it sound like the guy had a world of pressure off his shoulders. After the game, I friended him. We still talk on Steam sometimes. He really ended the relationship and ended up just putting all her—
A young boy enters a barber shop, and the barber whispers to his customer, "This is the dumbest kid in the world. Watch while I prove it to you." The barber puts a dollar bill in one hand and 2 quarters in the other, then calls the boy over and asks, "Which do you want, son?" The boy takes the quarters and leaves. "What did I tell you?" said the barber. "That kid never learns." Later, when the customer leaves, he sees the same young boy coming out of the ice cream parlor. "Hey son, may I ask you a question? Why did you take the quarters instead of the dollar bill?" The boy licked his cone and replied, "Because the day I take the dollar, the game is over." Attractive teachers. Did you know which students had a crush on you? Young male middle school teacher here. I know quite a few of them who have a crush on me. There's a new fad where they tell each other secrets and say who exposed, since when did snitching become popular anyway? I always get told who has a crush on me, and quite often, some of the girls will drop by to leave their athletic bags or instruments in the classroom, and they bring their friends in with them when they leave. I always hear comments like, "I wish I had him as my teacher." I once had a girl come in at lunch. She told me, "Sir, I like you," knowing full well what she meant. I tried to play it off and said, as nonchalant as I could, "I like you too. You're a great student." She was like, "No, I mean I really like you." I couldn't believe the tenacity. Another student asked me to take a picture with her towards the end of the school year. I obliged, and on the last day, she printed it out and gave it to me with her Instagram on the back and a message about how cute I was. Another girl found my Facebook and saved my profile picture as the background to her phone. I deleted my Facebook promptly afterward. If only I could get that kind of attention from girls my own age. What is the cutest mistake you've ever seen someone make? All of my children absolutely adore their grandpa. He has a warm smile, can soothe even the crankiest baby, and knows all the little tips and tricks to keep little people entertained. By the time each of my children has turned 2 years old, grandpa is their favorite person. However, they do go a few weeks between visits because they live 6 hours away. Needless to say, when the kiddos are young, they don't always exactly recall what grandpa looks like. When my daughter was about 2 years old, we were out grocery shopping, just the two of us. Suddenly, her excited little squeal startled every other shopper within earshot. "Grandpapa, Grandpa," she said with so much conviction that I actually believed it was him. However, I realized her little finger was pointing toward a little elderly man much older than my father. He had all the makings of a good grandpa. Gray hair, warm smile. It was an honest mistake. I almost corrected her when the old man said, "Hello there, little lady." She chatted on and on about the time he took her to the park and what she had for lunch. He intently listened until she got back to playing with her little doll. "Thank you, I'm out," to him. "When you get to be my age, if someone calls you grandpa, you just go on right ahead and let them." What highly illegal thing took place at your high school? Two students who were not much into studies planned and carried out a coordinated attack on one of the math teachers. They stood by the top of the stairs between periods waiting for the math teacher to pass, and when he passed by them to go down the steps, one of them pushed him from behind while the other put his leg out to trap him. We all heard the scream and came out of our classes to see what happened. The teacher fell down the steps and broke his neck and back and was paralyzed from the neck down. We ran towards the teacher to pick him up and help him while the two kids were watching us from top of the stairs. The kids were called to the principal's office, and when asked why did they do that, the kids reasoning because one of them was dropped from the basketball team because he was failing that teacher's math class and he wanted to revenge. Both of them were 15 years old, so they didn't get jail time. They both got expelled and were sent to juvenile detention. The teacher sued the school district and got a settlement in the lower 7-digit range. They literally ruined his life, but weren't punished more severely. We all felt bad for the teacher. A blonde and a lawyer are on a plane, and they're sitting next to each other. The lawyer gets bored and decides to play a game. He asks the blonde to join. The lawyer says, "We'll each ask each other a trivia question. If I ask you a question and you get it wrong, you give me $5. But if you ask a question and I get it wrong, I'll give you $100. The blonde is interested, so she decides to play. The lawyer asks his question first. "What's the distance between the Earth and the Moon?" Well, the blonde doesn't know, so she hands the lawyer $5. Now it's the blonde's turn. She asks the lawyer what goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4. The lawyer is stumped. What could possibly go up a hill with 3 legs and come down with 4? He begins to sweat. He starts asking other passengers. He pays for the in-flight internet to email his lawyer friends. Nobody knows. Nobody can help him. Reluctantly, he writes a $100 check to the blonde. She smirks, takes his check, pockets it, and turns over again, wishing to get back to her nap. The lawyer shakes her. "Hey, wait," he said. "What goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? The blonde hands him $5. A guy asked a girl in a university library, "Do you mind if I sit beside you?" The girl replied with a loud voice, "No, I don't want to spend the night with you." All the students in the library started staring at the guy. He was truly embarrassed. After a couple of minutes, the girl walked quietly to the guy's table and said, "I study psychology, and I know what a man is thinking. I guess you felt embarrassed, right?" The guy then responded with a loud voice, "$500 for one night? That is way too much." All the people in the library looked at the girl in shock. The guy stood and whispered in her ear, "I study law, and I know how to screw people." What family secret was finally spilled in your family? After my mom passed away, I found out the real story behind my parents' marriage. She came to my father's country to visit some of her relatives, met my father, and after just 1 week, she asked him to marry her so she could stay in the country. My father accepted because he had no one else, and his parents were pressing him to get married already. But the highlight of the story is that over some time, the two of them fell in love with each other. Their love only grew over the time, and they were really happy together. My mother spent her last days very ill, and she would accept only my father by her bedside. He swears to this day that she was an angel sent from God to take care of him. I am shocked that they got married just like that out of the blue and ended up loving each other so deeply. I can only hope to have as good and loving marriage as they had.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.